I'm going to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chairman of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Thursday, July 13th, 2023. The time is 11:31 in the morning. And this hearing is being somewhat conducted in person in room 123. The Johnny Wilson Building, but a number of witnesses are participating virtually via the Zoom video conference broadcast platform. This hearing is available on the chairman's website, www.chairmanmendelson.com/live. And it's also available on the council's website, www.dccouncil.gov. Again, www.dccouncil.gov. The subject of this hearing are 12 bills that have been introduced, all of which deal with naming a street or naming public space like a park. Most of these are symbolic namings, which means they're subordinate to, secondary to an official name. But there are a couple in here that are official namings. I will go over the bills. There are 12 of them. The first is Bill 25-171, entitled Alexander Crummell Way Designation Act of 2023. It was introduced by Councilmember Zachary Parker on February 28th of 2023. And the stated purpose is to symbolically designate the 1900 block of Gallaudet Street in Ward 5 as Alexander Crummell Way. The second bill is Bill 25-172, entitled William R. Spalding Way Designation Act of 2023. This legislation was also introduced by Councilmember Parker on February 28th, 2023. And the stated purpose is to symbolically designate the 1900 through 2200 blocks of Randolph Street Northeast in Ward 5 as William R. Spalding Way. William Spalding was the first elected council member from Ward 5 under home rule. The third bill is Bill 25-173, Sterling A. Brown Way Designation Act of 2023. Also introduced by Councilmember Parker on February 28th, 2023. The stated purpose of this bill is to symbolically designate the 1200 block of Kearney Street Northeast in Ward 5 as Sterling A. Brown Way. The next bill is Bill 25-174, entitled Rayford Logan Way Designation Act of 2023, also introduced by Councilmember Parker on February 28th, 2023. The stated purpose is to symbolically designate the 100 block of N Street Northwest in Ward 5 as Rayford Logan Way. The next bill in the hearing notice is Bill 25-175, John Mercer Langston Way Designation Act, but my understanding is that bill's been withdrawn. Bill 25-176, entitled Edna Brown Coleman Way Designation Act of 2023, introduced by Councilmember Parker on February 28th, would symbolically designate the 1400 block of Morse Street Northeast in Ward 5 as Edna Brown Coleman Way. Bill 25-177, entitled Julius Hobson Senior Way Designation Act of 2023. This was introduced by Councilmember Zachary Parker on February 28th, 2023. And the stated purpose is to symbolically designate the 4600 through 4800 blocks of Queens Chapel Terrace Road Northeast in Ward 5 as Julius Hobson Senior Way. In addition to being a statehood activist, Mr. Hobson was an at-large council member elected on the first elected council when we got home rule in 1974. The next bill is Bill 25-178, entitled Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way Designation Act of 2023, introduced by Councilmember Parker on February 28th, 2023. The stated purpose is to symbolically designate the 1800 block of Second Street Northwest in Ward 5 as Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way. Those were all introduced by Councilmember Parker. You have some bills introduced by some other folks. The Bill 25-193, entitled Jeanette A. Michael Way Designation Act of 2023, introduced on March 7th, 2023 by Council members Anita Bonds, joined by Councilmember Gray, Robert White, Denise Lewis George, Tran White, Pinto, and Councilmember Fruman. The stated purpose of this bill is to symbolically designate G Street between 19th Street and 22nd Street Northwest as Jeanette Michael Way, Jeanette A. Michael Way. And I think I said symbolically designate. The next bill is Bill 25-235, introduced by Councilmember Janice Lewis George on Monday, March 27th, 2023. It's entitled the Catlett Alley Designation Act of 2023. This would be an official designation to designate the public alley system within Square 3015, that's 3015, bounded by George Avenue Northwest, Crittenden Street, 9th Street, and Buchanan Street, all in Ward 4 as Catlett Alley Northwest. This is an official naming, and I don't know the details yet, but this could be to enable the assignment of addresses or interior structures or buildings in the square. The next measure is Bill 25-246, entitled Amigos Park Designation Act of 2023. This legislation was introduced on April 12th, 2023 by Councilmember Brianne Nadeau. This would be an official designation. It is what's intended to be a park. Designate the public right-of-way abutting Square 2596, Lot 1057 at the northwest corner of Mount Pleasant Street Northwest and Kenyon Street Northwest as Amigos Park. My understanding is that some of this may be privately owned, and if that is the case, the legislation, assuming that there's not significant opposition or other problems, that as it proceeds to mark up in the committee of the whole, that we will make changes to the bill so that we will designate the name Amigos Park for that which is publicly owned and enable the park to be expanded or enlarged. The next measure is Bill 25-316, entitled the Gordon Way Designation Act of 2023. This bill was introduced by Councilmember Brooke Pinto, joined by Council members Robert White, Vince Gray, Charles Allen, Nita Bonds, and Christina Henderson, introduced on Friday, June 2nd, 2023. And the stated purpose is to symbolically designate the public alley system within Square 242, bounded by 14th Street Rhode Island Avenue, Logan Circle, Vermont Avenue, and N Street, all in Northwest as Gordon Way. I believe that's all the bills, and I believe that's 12 bills that are the subject of this hearing. The way the Committee of the Whole has been handling these designations is once or twice a year, we have a hearing on all of the bills that have been introduced to date that are symbolic or official designations or namings. And so this hearing enables us to move forward if we want with these 12, which were introduced through June 2nd of this year. Some more have come in. There'll be another hearing probably at the end of this calendar year on those. Having the hearing today enables us to move forward in the fall with these bills. The record in this matter will close in 2 weeks. That is, it will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 27th, 2023. Let me be clear. The council is a political body. If somebody wants to write to us the day of a vote, they can do that, and members will probably consider whatever those comments are. But committees are required to file a record, and the Committee of the Whole will file the record for each of these bills, or for this hearing, I should say, with that which we have received as of 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 27th, 2023. We've been joined by Councilmember Zachary Parker, who's responsible for half of this hearing today. If you have an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair or Chairman Mendelson, for holding today's hearing on these bills, many of which I introduced in February at the end of Black History Month. And thank you to the many Ward 5 neighbors and advocates who have joined today to voice their support for these street designations. As we all know and have experienced, DC's reputation as a chocolate city is one that has drastically shifted amidst forces of gentrification and rapid development. While I have worked to confront these forces by disrupting cycles of poverty and displacement, fighting for more equitable development, and centering the voices and experiences of those who have known DC as home for generations, I also view the preservation of history as a key component in honoring this beautifully majority Black city. These bills seek to symbolically designate streets in honor of prominent Black figures with ties to Ward 5. The individuals whose names and memories I hope to uplift and preserve for generations to come are Alexander Crummell, a trailblazing minister, scholar, and community organizer. The bill would designate the street along which a school named in his honor currently sits in Ivy City. William R. Spalding, the first council member for Ward 5 after the restoration of limited home rule in the District of Columbia. The bill would designate the street along which William R. Spalding once lived in Woodridge. Sterling A. Brown, a renowned teacher and literary giant, often referred to as the Dean of African-American Poets and the first poet laureate of the District of Columbia. The bill would designate the street along which Sterling A. Brown once lived in Brookland. Rayford Logan, African-American historian, the 15th General President of the also distinguished Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, and for First Lieutenant in the all-Black 93rd Infantry Division during World War I. The bill would designate the street where Dunbar High School now sits, of which Rayford Logan was a proud graduate. Edna Brown Coleman, founding member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. The bill would designate a street near the Delta Towers, affordable apartments for seniors in Trinidad. Julius Hobson Sr., a passionate activist who became an at-large member of the Council of the District of Columbia and served as a member of the District of Columbia Board of Education. The bill would designate several blocks along the street where Julius Hobson Sr. once lived in North Michigan Park. And Dorothy Celeste Bolding Fairby, a civil rights and public health activist and innovative physician, and the 10th International President of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The bill would designate the street along which Dorothy Celeste Bolding Fairby once lived in Bloomingdale. With these bills, streets all across Ward 5 will bear the names of these remarkable people who have left indelible marks on the district. It is my hope that in doing so, generations to come will be prompted to remember these names, learn more about them, and even emulate their brilliance, community care, and vibrant advocacy, each of them displayed through their distinct lives and contributions. In closing, I want to say thank you to the many neighbors who have been at the center of bringing these names forward. We've engaged and received the support of the Ward 5 Senior Advisory Committee, talked to ANCs, been humbled to talk with family members of these prominent figures, several of which are present today to provide testimony, and I've heard from dozens of neighbors who are supportive of these designations. And these are just the first designations, with more to come as Ward 5 residents continue to collaborate with us and as we prepare additional nominations. I am proud to honor them today. And again, thank the many witnesses to come who have submitted testimony. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. All right, we're going to proceed, and we're going to take up these measures in bill order, which is the same order in which I read them. So the first bill is Bill 25-171, Alexander Kamel Way Designation Act of 2023. Most of the witnesses are online. I'm going to call all the witnesses for this bill. Robert King, Sabrina Rhodes, who's listed as a community organizer with Empower DC and an advisory neighborhood commissioner with ANC 5D. Diamante Powell, who's listed as Ivy City Clubhouse Youth Leader, also with Empower DC. Isaiah Neal, who is listed as an Ivy City Clubhouse Youth Leader and with Empower DC. Everyone here except the last individuals listed as Ivy City Clubhouse Youth Leader and with Empower DC. Messiah Cuthbertson, Mekhi Grant, Talia Howard, Maya Lambright, Amari Young. And I believe Harry Thomas Jr. wants to testify on this. If you want to come forward. Come forward now. Is there anybody else present who wishes to testify on this bill? Let me see who's here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Give me just a second, Mr. King. All right, so let's begin with Mr. King, Bob King.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning
Good
to the
morning.
council members, and particularly to our council member Zachary Parker. For the record, my name is Bob King, former ANC commissioner for Fort Lincoln, 32 years as ANC commissioner, 10 years as the Fort Lincoln Civic Association. Tremendous labor love, and it was an honor to serve. I'm also co-convener for the newly Ward 5 Leadership Council, co-convener with committee woman Hazel Thomas. There's a common thread that brought faith leaders, the business community, and prominent leaders and community advocates and ANC commissioners, that we had 3 council members in Ward 5. I want to thank Councilmember Parker, Councilmember Barnes, and Councilmember McDuffie for allowing us to participate in their budget initiatives for Ward 5, and look forward to a very productive relationship. Moving forward, Mr. Chairman, I want to bring to the attention that just was so eloquently laid out for Ray Logan, who lived at 1519 Jackson, and also for William Spalding, as we mentioned, was the first council member in 1975, and Sterling Brown, who lived at 1222 Kearney. I'm asking the full council without hesitation and reservation to move those nominations, those street namings. This is for the young people, and of course for those that are unborn. I echo everything that the Councilman Parker has said why we stand behind these young individuals. And hopefully the next round, we will talk about Ralph Bunch and also Aja Cotman and Bernard Brown, the 11-year-olds who died tragically in 9/11. Again, I would be totally remiss if I did not salute Councilmember Parker. Councilmember Parker was sworn in on January the 2nd, 2023. Today is January the 13th, 2023. He's been on the job 6 months, 1 week, and 4 days. The number of days that Councilmember Parker has been in office has been 192 days. The number of weeks that he's been in office has been 27 weeks and 4 days. The number of hours that Councilmember Parker has been on the job has been 4,631. I salute you, Councilmember Parker, for planning with the community, not for the community, you and your staff. You indeed have shown some tremendous leadership, not only for following up, but for following through. What separates you from some of the other leaders is that you not only can you open a door, but you can close the door. And I salute you today for just the vision of bringing those folks that this is long overdue. I also want to salute Councilman McDuffie for the baby bond and for the statues in each ward of people of color. There were over 125 people that signed up for a reparation hearing. I'm asking all of the council members to vote unanimously to support that reparation hearing. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. You singled out several of these bills. I think it was the one for Rayford Logan, Bill Spalding
Yeah, I have.
was the third.
Yeah, I've had 3 of them that over 40 of the leadership folks that met on February the 18th at Denny's. And then I had another call meeting on June the 22nd with over 22 leaders on the Zoom call. And they all supported. I submitted about 7 names, but when I reached out to Councilmember Parker, lo and behold, there were other folks in Ward 5 that had dreams, hopes, and aspirations for doing the same thing. So I submitted these 3 names, and of course, they were made part of the group, and words are inadequate to express what I feel about this hearing today, this momentous hearing, this history-making hearing, and for Councilmember Parker to just have the nerve and the mitigated garb to even say, let's do this, and we're going to continue to do it.
Now, Mr. King, you didn't actually answer my question. So there were 3 that you mentioned in particular, and I believe it was Rayford Logan, Bill
Yeah,
Spalding.
Rayford Logan is Designation Act 12B25-0174. Sterling Brown Designation Act is B25-0173. Councilmember Spalding Designation Act B25-0172.
Great. We will have committee reports for each, and I want to be sure to list you as testifying in support. Thank you, Mr. King. Sabrina Rhodes.
Thank you.
So I'm told that Ms. Rhodes is not going to testify, but the others who follow are going to be on her Zoom account. So I'll keep moving. Diamante Powell.
Hello.
Please proceed, and good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, council members. My name is Diamante, and I stand before you today to express my strong support for the proposal to name Gallaudet Street in Ivy City. As a resident and I firmly believe that this change will bring and contribute to the overall well-being of our neighborhood. Allow me to present my testimony outlining the positive impact this renaming will have on Ivy City. First and foremost, renaming the street presents a unique opportunity to honor and celebrate the rich history and diverse culture of our community. By renaming the street after Alexander Crummell, we can pay homage to our roots, instill a sense of pride in our residents, and ensure that our shared history is preserved and recognized for generations to come. By carefully selecting a name like Alexander Crummell that resonates with the values of unity, diversity, and progress, we can foster a great belonging among residents. Renaming the street is an act of building, promoting inclusiveness and a shared sense of identity. It sends a powerful message that Ivy City is a place where everyone is welcome, regardless of their background or origin. In conclusion, renaming Ivy City is a significant opportunity for positive change. It allows us to honor our past, drive economic growth, foster community cohesion, and promote inclusiveness. I urge you to consider immense benefits this will bring and support the proposal. knowing that it will contribute to the betterment of Ivy City and the well-being of its residents. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Isaiah Neal.
Good morning, council members. My name is Isaiah Neal. I have been an Ivy City resident for most of my 20 years of life. I stand here to state my case on the changing of the street from 1900 Gallaudet Block Street Northeast to the name of Alexander Camille Way. I feel like changing the street is a great way to encourage community bonding, on top of bringing an eminent figure to another part of Ivy City. Changing the name Alexander Camille Way will bring a vast cultural and historical advantage to Ivy City. Another reason that changing the name would be a good idea is to expedite the construction on the Camille Community Center, which would greatly improve morale and quality for the community. In conclusion, I agree with changing the name as long as it proves to be a positive change and not a destructive one. Another thing I wanted to bring up was that I share a wall with the community, with the actual chemical plant on Capitol and Fenwick Street, and it is making my family sick at the moment. So I would just like to invite you down here so that you can actually take a look at it yourself and see what it is doing to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Messiah Cuthbertson. Morning.
I'm Messiah. I'm a resident of Ivy City and have lived here close to 6 years. I wanted to state my opinion as I agree with the bill to change Gallaudet Street to Alexander Cromwell Way, as it will be better to have a street named after a historically Black person who helped our neighborhood. And while we are fighting for a school that he had made for us when we couldn't learn. It'll also make it so we will learn more about our history by posting more information around. And it'll also help others learn. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Cuthbertson. Mekhi Gant.
Oh, come on, it's coming. Just say your name, you're correct.
Hello, my name is Mekhi Gant. I'm a resident of Ivy City. I've lived here several years, and I come here today to state my opinion about the renaming of the street. I think that personally, it is a good thing for them to rename the street, because also he has a lot of history, and just also with the school has a lot of background that comes with it. Like, he allowed us to go to school and get our education things. And I believe that if we do this, it will have a positive effect on the community to do better, and also it will have a positive effect to make the community more aware of, just their history and what's happening around them. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Talia Howard.
She's coming. Good morning, council members. Hello, my name is Talia Howard. I am a non-resident at Ivy City, but I do stand with the residents and the community in support of Alexander Camille Way resignation after 2023. This is my first year at SYP to help and give and provide for the community. As well we do, Camille did also, as we move on his legacy to be the leader. Camille has done so much for everyone, such as providing materials and making sure everyone was doing their job so everyone could succeed, and residents are thankful. as what Kamel did has not had and what he's been through, he made sure everyone else had it. He made sure he made a positive effect on diversity to Black kids to have what they need and bring them all together. Alexander Kamel has been here for a good while after he moved to Africa. My opinion on him is good. I believe his name should be put on the street for not just being an influential person, but for having an impact on the school and people and community and what he has done for everyone. If Alexander Kamel can do so much for people, then SYP can do it. Also by bringing trust and structure in the community to let people know we have a voice and our history will not be erased, and to have Alexander Kamel history be forever remembered for what he has done would not be forgotten. So to have his name on the street will bring great positivity to Ivy City and University of Sailor Lake. Thank you for giving me your time to consider to put his name on the street.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Maya Lambright.
Good morning. My name is Maya Lambright, and I strongly agree on renaming Gallaudet Street in honor of Alexander Kamel. Even though I am not a resident of Ivy City, I still admire its cultural history and want the best for the people in this community. I believe that naming the street after Alexander Kamel is a great way to acknowledge his impact on the community. During Kamel's time in Ivy City, he became a preacher and an educationalist for Black youth. He strived to better the education for Black youth in the community. That is why I think it is empowering for his legacy to be commemorated on the same street where a school is dedicated to him. Ivy City has a lot of history that needs to be remembered, and Alexander Kamel is one of the people that needs to be of today and generations to come. Alexander Kamel Way not only can represent his legacy, but it also can be a sense of new beginning for the Kamel Recreation Center. When Kamel gets remodeled, the community will be more unified and everyone will have a place where they can embrace their identity and culture. Overall, I believe that renaming Gallaudet Street is a good way to represent Alexander Kamel's legacy. I feel like everyone in the community should know about him because of what he did for Ivy City. Thank you for taking your time to listen to my statement today, and I hope more great things like this will happen for Ivy City.
Thank you. Ms. Lambright, before you disappear entirely, you said you were a non-resident of Ivy City, but you live in the city? Do you live in DC?
Yes.
Okay, and I meant to ask the same thing of Ms. Howard, Talia Howard. I think you said you were a non-resident of Ivy City,
Yes, I am a non-resident as Ivy City.
but do you live in the city?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Thank you, each of you. Amari Young.
Good morning. My name is Amari Young. I am a 14-year-old former resident of Ivy City, and I stand with you today to help my community build its greatness and legacy by supporting the bill 25-0171. Alexander Kamel Way designation after 2023 to the name of Gallaudet Street to Alexander Kamel Way. This has a lot of impacts of this community, having community needs with DPR, even walking around, having protests. I believe that my community, Ivy City, would be very excited if the city would give us a bigger space to go and even to play. This is a way of showing honor of Alexander Kamel because he has done many things for the people more, such as Black African Americans, having many positive effects, diversity on Black kids, bringing them all together in the community. We've been fighting for several years, wanting a school space of Alexander Kamel and street based on Alexander Kamel. Having Gallaudet Street change Alexander Kamel Way to help us do many more protests, bringing more people together and even build more relationships, helping us continue doing what we're doing way back, wanting the legacy to keep going. Thank you for giving your time, listening to my opinion for this community.
Thank you. Before you disappear, did you say you were a resident of Ivy City or just of the city?
I'm a former resident of Ivy City.
And you live in DC now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have present in the room Harry Thomas Jr., former council member. I recognize you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is truly a pleasure to be here before you and this committee. And really a pleasure to be here in support of my council member, and I say that with my heart, my council member, who is one who has hit the ground running and not afraid to do things that make our community better. But before I go on with that, I want to say that I want to thank Ms. Rhodes for what she has done with those young people in a community in which my mother grew up in a community in which my current business operates out of at 1356 Oakey Street, which is District GC. And I partner with the Smokehouse and the Crow Fish to do my work over there, but I go there every day. And Ms. Rhodes, I just want to say from my heart, to see young people that you continuously work with to understand the importance of civic involvement is the key to all of this. And so while I'm here to speak on behalf of all of the designations that Councilmember Parker has put forward, I will speak specifically to a couple of them. And I will do that because one, I will start with Alexander Cramel, because my mother went to school there, has been part of this. And when I was council member, we did the first, I think, historical document from the council's point of view to lay out what it means to live in Ivy City and Cramel. And that was because of Parisa and what she did with me and working with Empower DC. But more importantly, my mother not only went to school there, came back to that school with that name, became an educator and taught there, and went on to have a distinguished career and come back in her senior years to support a long overdue renovation of Cramel School. And so I think the street naming is another step towards that, and I hope we will get closer. But I just wanted to make sure I said those things before you. I am going to speak specifically in deep heartfelt love and affection for our first council member, William Spalding. As a former council member, he set the path for us to get on a very business-like Ward 5. It is interesting because one of the things I want to say to everybody watching is, you know, a lot of people think in politics there are rivalries and things, but the most important thing I know is we were community people. I say that about that, even though my father was a council member, to follow him, they always remained cordial, always remained friend and respectful. And one of the things they had to do that was because I know his daughters will testify later on today, Angela and Deirdre. We all grew up together. Mr. Spalding was in our PTA. He helped do things in schools. Before school restructuring was even around, Mr. Spalding was at the front of it. He also taught me some valuable lessons about being his paper boy, how to be on time, how to deliver my papers and make sure I ensured that he got the service that he was required as a person. But he was always a mentor and a role model in our community. He had educational excellence. He was a brilliant man, and more than just on this council. And so I just wanted to say that from my family, my mother couldn't be here today, but she asked that I expressly say that she was wholeheartedly in support of this. And for me to walk out the door of my mother's house at 21st and Randolph Street and to have Randolph now become part of his legacy is no greater honor than we can have. And in my last one, I'm going to get at, I understand you removed the Langston one off, but I do support Langston and what he has accomplished. But Ms. Brown, who was my sister and fraternal bond, as she's a Delta and I'm an Omega, I had to get that in because Mr. Parker wanted to say the Alpha piece, but I always tell him, remember, the Bible always says the first shall be last and the last shall be first. And he will be in Omega heaven one day, so it's okay. But I wanted to support Ms. Brown and what she's done and what the Deltas have done in the revitalization. And I just wanted to make sure that you know that our community supports you and your efforts, and we applaud you. Thank you, Mr. Mendelson, for expediting this, and thank you for the council for hearing my brief and humble words.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience because you've been here since before the hearing began.
Mr. Mendelson, I will tell you there's some things you have to show up for. And I didn't want to do Zoom. I wanted to be here in person with my council member and you, because this is important to the history of our community, the history of this city, and recognizing with the ongoing changes in the city that there are pioneers in the city that are going forgotten. And Mr. Parker has taken the courage to bring this forward. So there's no way I couldn't drive downtown and see both of your wonderful faces today.
Well, it's good to see your face, so
Thank
thank you. I do, let me just see if I have, I'm going to recognize you if you have any questions for any of the witnesses.
Less question. Well, I'll, is Mr. King still on? Mr. King, can you hear me?
Yes.
As a longtime resident and a leader of our community, can you just speak to why it's significant that we honor Mr. Logan, Mr. Brown, Mr. Spalding, among others?
Yeah, just briefly, as I said, when I presented those names on February the 18th, we were coming to the close of Black History Month. And when I grew up, it was Black History Week. And now it's Black History Month. And because it's shortest month of the 12 months, because it was Abraham Lincoln's birthday and also Frederick Douglass. So that's why we come to why it's the shortest month. And at that meeting on the 18th, with the 40 leaders, and we were looking around the ward, and we only had Harry Thomas Way, in which I was senior, which I was a part of that. We had Willie Woods, who was the great Green Bay Packer standout and Hall of Famer. And then we had Paul Washington, who chaired the Ward 5 Education Committee. And then was thinking that we're looking at Lillian Huff's Library, which I was a member of that committee, along with the mayor, former Mayor Pranchett Kelly, to name the Lillian Huff Library. And then come have these street signs, and with all of the stuff that we got going on with young people today, that I think that even after we have the unveiling of all these signs in Ward 5, I just think that they need to be housed into Lillian Huff's Library, not just for Black History Week or Black History Month, because it's Black History every single minute, every single day, as we wrestle with not justification. Al Sharpton called it a weapon of mass destruction and wealth and equity. The list goes on and on and on. So to have you to step out, and that's why I indicated the time that you've been in the office, about an hour, about a minute, about a second, that this is something that I believe that will help young people more than anything. They just don't know the shoulders of who we stand on, and Ralph Bunche, who couldn't even come back after his settlement of the Arab and Israel War in 1948, couldn't even send his children to slow school in Ward 5, and Robert Weaver. And the list goes on with Patricia Harris, who was a Black woman who occupied 2 cabinet level positions. She was the ambassador to Luxembourg. She was the dean of Howard, just buried over in Ward 4. And it's time for us, and then on July the 1st, we named Good Hope Road after Marion Barrett. And we need to continue to do this for young people now and unborn. And I think it will help stem the tide of crime when people can say, oh, and point to these leaders and have a reason to go to the library. And I think that would help. And one of the things that you ask people in the community, every April the 4th, I ask people in the community, they know about Dr. King. Young people don't. And we coming up on the 60th anniversary of Dr. King, and poverty is just as high as it was in August the 23rd, 1968, and unemployment to some extent in housing. And so this is a great opportunity under your leadership and the council, in the words of Spike Lee, please do the right thing. I mean, to do the right thing, in the words of James Brown, please, please, in the words of late Congressman late Congressman, to do the right, John Lewis, to do the right thing. And I think that's what we're doing today with this momentous hearing that will forever find its rightful place in the history books. And again, I'm proud to have done this in Fort Lincoln. I worked with Angie Corley to rename the school Fort Lincoln after a great freedom fighter, Justice Thurgood Marshall Brown versus the Board of Education. I have Robert Weaver's Way in Fort Lincoln, the first housing, the director. And also I have, as I said, Robert Weaver Way and Theodore Hagen's Way. So we're on our way. Stay together, children. Let's keep on moving. And thank you for your leadership and your courage, Councilmember Parker. You're doing the right thing.
Thank you. 2 more quick questions, emphasis on quick. There has been a question posed by at least one neighbor of where these names came from. And I just want on the record that before this was introduced, you highlighted that you, among some 40 other neighbors, discussed many of the names that are on this list. Is that accurate?
Oh, we discussed many of the names on the list. In fact, I was bragging about you and I didn't even talk to you. I
Well,
said,
that's-
I'm gonna take this list to council member. We're gonna get this thing done. And when I called you, there were like minds all over the ward thinking about the same thing. So 40 members on February the 18th supported this, and we came back on a Zoom meeting June.
I think the sound may have went out.
You may have muted yourself.
Mr. King, we can no longer hear you. We can't hear you.
Stations to move these names after these individuals. And I look
Okay.
forward to council members saying in the next few months to come back with Ralph Bunch, Asia Cartman, and Bernard Brown, the two young folks who died tragically in the 9/11.
I really appreciate that. So again, just on the record, there has been ample discussion about this. These names didn't just drop from the sky, and I appreciate you highlighting that. One last question, Mr. King. Out of the names that you did not speak about, because you highlighted Mr. Logan, Mr. Brown, Mr. Spalding, are there any that you object to?
I don't object to anything. I just wish I could have gotten Dr. Ralph Bunch and Asia Copman, Robert Weaver, and all the other folks I wish, and as the chairman said, we'll be able to come back. This is done at a special time with the council. So we're gonna continue to do it until we get it right.
Yes, thank you.
And you're on the move to getting it right. And of course, the chairman, Phil Minister, he understands what we have to do in terms of this. And Councilmember Bonds and McDuffie and you, we have 3 council members in Ward 5. So we are lockstep, and all of the faith leaders, business community, ANCs, prominent leaders, Ward 5 advocates are behind this this great day for us.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. To the young people that testify, namely about Mr. Cromell, I have less of a question and want to applaud you all for your testimony today. It was very moving to hear, especially for you all to speak about the impact that a street naming as well as the renovation of the old Cromell School will have on your community and on your lives. And I think your testimony today will go far. Mr. Thomas, it is great to see you again. And similar to the last question I asked Mr. King, I know you highlighted several of these, Mr. Cromell, Mr. Spalding, Ms. Brown. Are there any of the other names that are on this list that you object to?
Well, the only reason I highlighted just those is because of our time and respect to the council's procedures, but I support in full all of those nominations, and also Langston, who was removed from this.
Yes.
And also, I do want to say to Bob, I thank him for bringing up Asia Cotman. We have a plaque in front of the UDC's campus site at Bacchus that when we got that done, we made sure we put that there, and her family has been steadfast in trying to remember what happened with 9/11. So when you think about these things, that's just remember that we do have ongoing conversations. I was in some of those conversations with Bob about this. And so I don't want any neighbors watching this to believe that this was done in a vacuum. It was not. It was done very publicly. We continue to have conversations about it. And it takes people like you who have the courage to go forward on these said names, because a lot of people can think a lot of things, but one of the things about each one of these people, they have made significant indelible marks in our minds, our hearts, and our community.
Absolutely. And last thing I would say, we did introduce a proposed naming for Mr. Langston in the Langston community. To show how iterative this process is, we then received a request to honor Lee Elder, another very prominent Black neighbor that has ties to the Langston Golf Course. And we were persuaded that it was best to withdraw that Langston street naming and to introduce one for Lee Elder, which will come up later this year. And so I just wanted to highlight that we are finding other ways to honor Mr. Langston and look forward to honoring Mr. Lee Elder. Again, I'll give you 30 seconds to close this out.
And I
Yes.
would just say to you, thank you for putting that on the record. And I wanted to make sure you put that on the record because I kind of knew that. And I also want to thank you as you went out recently to the Charlie Siffords golf thing and met our young people from McKinley and some of the local high schools who participated in their golf experience, and you understand the importance of Langston. So that's not what I'm saying at all. I
Yes.
don't want anybody to believe that. I think you have to have bigger considerations because Lee Elder was a giant and he's done a lot for us. So I want to thank you. And I do want to say I'm glad to see that Mr. Spalding's daughter and son-in-law have walked in the room and that I promised her I would be here. And she made sure I was here. So, you know, we grew up together and I just want to tell
It's a
people
family
It's
reunion.
a family reunion, baby. And I love her much. We went to John Burroughs, right? And all those things. And so her
What-
family, I know up in heaven, Dolores Spalding, William Spalding, Harry Thomas are slapping it up, clapping it up and having a good time right now.
Absolutely. Well,
Thank you, Councilman.
again, it's great to see you. And Mr. Chairman, that's it for me. But when we have these street unveilings, it'll be great to have you over in Ward 5.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And Councilmember Thomas, since you've testified to all of these, I'm not going to call you again when we get to the subsequent bills.
You know, Phil, I worked with you a long time, so I made sure I was concise, brief, and did it just how you
Oh, you
wanted
did
it
all
done.
the
Thank you,
above.
sir.
You get a gold star. Thank you. I do want to note anybody who wishes to submit written testimony can do so through the hearing management system. This is a new system that the council has. Go to the council's website, www.dccouncil.gov, www.dccouncil.gov, and click on hearings and you could submit your testimony. We attach written testimony to the committee reports on these bills. If we don't have written testimony, we won't attach it. That's going to conclude the testimony on this bill, 25-171. The next bill is 25-172, William R. Spalding Way Designation Act of 2023. Deidre Spalding Yeoman, if you'd come forward to the table, Emmanuel Yeoman, Vantilla Daniel, Harry Thomas Jr. just testified. Romeo Spalding and Angie Corley Demery. Some folks may be online. I believe Romeo Spalding is online. Ms. Spalding Yeoman, you want to begin? And good morning. Turn your microphone on. Hit the button. Yes, red means
Red button is showing. Yes,
is
thank
go.
you.
thank you.
William R. Spalding, a gentleman and scholar, a man ahead of his time. The Honorable Dr. William R. Spalding served as the district's first Ward 5 council member, serving 3 terms. A native of Hallsborough, North Carolina, William grew up working on the family farm. His parents imbued him with a strong sense of responsibility towards others. Moving to DC in the 1940s to attend Howard University, William graduated with honors in 1947 with a degree in mechanical engineering. In 1959, he and his wife purchased a home on Randolph Street. The couple worked together on many projects. For example, they produced and directed the Mahalia Jackson Show on WOOK-TV, which was at that time the only Black television station in Washington, D.C. Williams' commitment to investing in people was illustrated in service as a member of the Fort Lincoln Newtown Advisory Committee designed to oversee the development of a planned community in DC. It was at his suggestion that housing for senior citizens was included. In 1974, Mr. Spalding was elected to represent Ward 5. During his first term, he was appointed as the sole member of the council's Committee on Higher Education. That committee was charged with complying with congressional directives to create a comprehensive system of higher education for residents of DC. Within 1 year, despite significant opposition from other institutions in the District of Columbia, Councilmember Spalding was successful in crafting and shepherding through the council DC Law 1-36, also known as the University of District of Columbia's enabling legislation. This piece of legislation consolidated the separate predecessor institutions to, for the first time, create a comprehensive system of public higher education for all residents of the District of Columbia. An unintended side effect of DC Law 1-36 has been its successful use in court cases as precedent for the council's ability to amend congressional legislation pertaining to the District of Columbia. Councilman Spalding was the first council member to introduce computers into his office During his 3 terms on the council, William Spalding served on a variety of committees, subsequently chairing the Committee on Education and then the Committee on Government Operations. His legislative portfolio was diverse and included preventing a household's water from being cut off while the bill was being disputed, occupational health and safety, protection for victims of motor vehicle accidents, full political participation, repeal of the death penalty, improving the management of the DC government, and reforming the merit, personnel, and procurement systems of the District of Columbia. Councilman Spalding worked tirelessly to help individuals reach their fullest capacity. He initiated and implemented a program to bring high school and college interns into his council office, later expanding this program to include returning citizens. As a big believer in the value of the arts, Councilman Spalding began DC Metro Talent Search. After retiring from the city council in 1987, Mr. Spalding taught mathematics as an adjunct professor at UDC and continued his involvement with an array of community, faith-based, and educational organizations. William received numerous awards and accolades, one of which was from the Court Service and Offender Supervision Agency. Organizational involvement included membership in Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, member of the Board of Directors of IDEA Public Charter School, member of the Board of Directors of the Benjamin and Edith Spalding Descendants Association and Foundation. In 2014, William R. Spalding became the recipient of the Doctor of Humane Letters from the University of the District of Columbia. A gentleman and scholar, a man ahead of his time. Today, let's move forward with William R. Spalding Way. Thank you. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Spalding Yeoman. I have a statement from you that's considerably shorter than that. Would you provide what you just read to us as well?
Absolutely,
Please.
absolutely.
Good, because then we can include that. Emmanuel Yeoman?
Yes, my name is Dr. Emmanuel Yeoman because of the Honorable Dr. William R. Spalding and what he's done for me in my life. Councilman Spalding did a lot for everyone in Ward 5, the nation, and Washington, DC. I recall the many things he's done for children, youth, adults, and seniors in Ward 5 and surrounding communities. One memory of a day, a bunch of us kids were playing football on a bumpy field, on an open bumpy field. Councilman Spalding saw us, parked his car, came over to us, walked over to us, and talked to us about different things. One of the things he talked to us about is the importance of staying in school, the importance of education and staying in school. He asked us if we wanted a recreation center built in our community. Of course, we said yes. And the whole recreation center was built in our facility. The thing about it is the 33 children he just stopped randomly and talked to us. All 33 kids actually graduated college with a college degree. And it went on to be successful people in the community of Washington, DC. In March 1997, an article by Washington newspaper appreciation for Councilman Spalding. His hard work was expressed. He was noted for his quiet, low-key method of getting things done and being a person who always was willing to tackle the technical issues faced by the council. No matter how tedious or time-consuming it was, he was not a screamer or yeller, but spent his time trying to make things better for the community he served. Councilman Spalding was credited with the work as a government operation chair with improving the city's ability to conduct elections. He was actually the first person who had a computer on his desk here in this building. Also, as a result of council members' work on the procurement process issues, minorities will have a fair share of contracts in the city. Councilman Spalding was praised as he, excuse me, I lost my place. Councilman Spalding was praised as being instrumental in raising the political consciences of property owners in Ward 5 and other surrounding wards. Councilman Spalding was always willing to help the less fortunate, like myself. There are many quotes from famous men who reflect William R. Spalding. I selected a few. A gentleman is one who puts more into the world than he takes out. Distant cousin, George Bernard Shaw. Being a good man means having the courage to stand up for what you believe in, even if you have to stand alone. From Dr. Martin Luther King. The greatness of a man is not how much wealth he acquires, but his integrity and ability to affect those around him positively. Bob Marley. This concludes my testimony in support of Bill 125, excuse me, Bill 75, Bill 25-172, Dr. William R. Spalding Way, designated act of 2023. Amen. Thank you and have a great day on purpose.
Thank you, Dr. Yeoman. And if you could provide a copy of your statement, I'd appreciate that as well. We can include it with the record and as well as with the committee report.
Yes, sir.
My understanding is Vantilla Daniel is not here and Romeo Spalding is,
He should be virtual.
yes, although he needs to accept and. Okay, if you would proceed, Mr. Romeo Spalding. Don't disappear in case there are any questions for you. I may not, but I don't know if Councilman Parker will sit in. Yes, David. Mr. Romeo Spalding, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good afternoon, Councilman Mendelson, to the distinguished and honorable members of the DC City Council. I am Romeo Spalding, actually a cousin of the late Dr. William R. Spalding. I am not writing or reading anything. I grew up with him in North Carolina. I walked with him through all of the steps that I've heard delineated there this morning about him and the legacy of his involvement within the District of Columbia. I remembered when he was a professor at Howard University, working with students back in 1958 to develop what is now WHUR, to try to help them build a radio station. And I remember when they got a license to run for 2 hours on a Saturday as the first pre-run of that station. I remember him working with Dr. Eaton to deal with WOKTV, looking at what could happen with Blacks within intelligent television and entertainment. That's when he put together the Mahalia Jackson gospel program, and that ran on that station for years. He was a person that talked about Fort Lincoln back in the 1958, 59, 60. He was involved with the NSA and then looking at the development of the District of Columbia. It was talking about the new town, and that was before anything was happening. There was a boys' town there. I can speak very specifically about things because I worked in that area for 18 years. I was a member of the District of Columbia Fire and Emergency Services Department, serving at Engine 26 and Truck 15. It had first due responsibilities for that area and the other companies that dealt with Ward 5 all over. So I worked there to help him when he started running for public office. I remember when he was the president of the PTA at Taft Junior High, at McKinley Senior High School. I remember when he was involved with trying to run for the city council. Matter of fact, I helped to work with his church and everything to deal with that campaign. I was listening to Harry Thomas Jr. I worked with his father, his mother. I remember him growing up. I remember him when he ran for the city council afterwards. I remember Bob King. I remember him being a young fella. All of those people that I heard talk about there, I remember them, and I remember the impact that they had on people. William Spalding was one that was very attuned to education. What he did, not only in the establishment of the University of District of Columbia, but before that, he was trying to push areas that could help those that was in the fire and emergency service, police, and also corrections to be able to attain education. So they were able to navigate legislation whereby that those individuals who were members of those departments, if they maintained good grades, could go to those institutions tuition free. And so what happened after that, there was a time whenever we had a situation trying to deal with desegregating the DC Fire and Emergency Service Department. From that particular effort, there was a cadet program that birthed out of that. With that cadet program, William R. Spalding, Wilhelmina Rolark, David Clark, those were the instrumental people who worked to put it together. And the reason why I wanted to go there, just to give you an example, is that the cadet program became effective. It provided a connection for individuals coming out of high school, going into world of work or either education, but it provided them with a free tuition educational opportunity at the University of District of Columbia. And all they had to do was to go, and then they could become members of the DC Fire and Emergency Service Department or the Metropolitan Police Department. Just to talk about that, Chief Conti, who just retired as the police chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, he was a member of the cadet program and grew up. There's a young lady in the DC Fire and Emergency Service Department who is the assistant fire chief named Queen Anune, is a product of the cadet program. I just named that to show you that what the vision of those that Councilmember Spalding had was what he could see in people and what they could become. And those are examples of individuals who came through that particular program. Not to mention what he did when he was dealing with technology, because I remember him setting up the first distant learning process, which was done between the DC City Council, I think, when the NSA, and that was the development of what was happening. That shows you how far he was out there with his thinking. But then when you look at what he did in the community, and not only while he was in the council, but subsequent to that time, I'm speaking not only as a family member, but we have a family organization, which is called the Benjamin Edith Spalding Descendants Association, which covers our family all over the United States, actually globally. But here in Maryland, and DC and Virginia, we have what is called the metro area region of that. I am the director of that region, and Deirdre Spalding is the vice director of that region, and Angela Spalding is the district coordinator of the Benjamin Edith Spalding Descendants Association. The family is doing very aggressive things to empower our people, and not only in the District of Columbia, but all over. And this is because of William R. Spalding, his vision. He was the one that planted the seed to how to develop the family to make an impact, not only here in the District of Columbia, but in Maryland and Virginia and throughout the United States. And there are things that are going on that you can see the results of that. I could just go on and talk more and more and more about the impact of the Honorable William R.
I'm not gonna
Spalding.
cut you off, or I might, but you've been about 6 minutes.
Oh, I have, I'm noted for talking long, but I try to talk effectively with something that is meaningful. But I'm sorry to go over your time. But if you like, I echo all of what Deirdre Spalding, his daughter, put on the record, and of course all of the other things. And I would remiss myself if I did not recognize Councilmember Parker. I am so elated of his energy and what he's doing. I'm a member of the Progressive Firefighters Association, and two of the members, even the president of it, lives in his ward. I have been trying to get them to get very active in the political process and working with Councilmember Parker. because there's a lot of things that can be done and will be done. And believe it or not, Black firefighters has the ability to make changes beyond what people could imagine. I could share with you those things, but time will not permit. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk on behalf of renaming the 19 to the 2300 block of Randolph Street Northeast in honor of the late Dr. William R. Spalding as the William R. Spalding Way. Thank you so very much, and you all have a blessed day.
Thank you, Mr. Spalding. And if you want to give us a copy of your statement, although it sounded to me like it was extemporaneous, please do so.
Thank you.
Let me see if Angie Corley Demery is here. I believe she's not here, but we do have her written statement. Councilmember Parker, do you have any questions?
No questions, but it is great to see you all again. And it is an honor to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Spalding, or I should say Dr. Spalding. And I am mindful of the impact that this street designation will have on neighbors, on young people, on your family. And I am looking forward to moving forward with this honor. One of the things that has impressed me with Mr. Spalding's family is the ways in which you all have continued to give back to the Ward 5 community in his honor and in his memory. And I am just glad that we can contribute in this way. So it is great to see you all again. Mr. Spalding, Romeo Spalding, I was actually really appreciative and moved by your testimony. And in the ways that you're talking about the legacy of family and how you all are contributing to that across this country. And so hopefully the many descendants of the Spalding family will be able to add this to your list of many testaments to the great people that are in your lineage. So I'll end there, but thank you all for coming to testify, and it's an honor to move this on your behalf.
Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure.
Before anybody gets up, I do have one question. This legislation proposes naming, looks to me like it's 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks. Typically, we name one block. Why so many blocks?
That's a very good question. I can only, and I'll chime in, then defer to the council member. I can only infer that just because of my father's widespread influence, that it required more than one block, but I do understand what you're saying. Having said that, I will defer to the Councilman Parker.
I think you said it best. As our first Ward 5 council member and the significant influence he's had on our community, we thought it was important to honor him in a different way. We've also engaged with neighbors across that stretch, and they are all enthusiastic. In fact, we also have testimony from Shirley Riven Smith and many others that are saying, please name these streets on behalf of William Spalding. And so we wanted to delineate his significance as a former council member from other street namings.
I'll leave it with that. Thank you all.
Thank you.
very much
Thank
for
you.
your testimony. We will turn now to Bill 25-173, Sterling A. Brown Way Designation Act. There's no witness who signed up for that. I'll note that that Bob King had testified supportive of that. That'll be reflected in the committee report. The next bill is Bill 25-174, Rayford Logan Way Designation Act. And again, we don't have any witnesses who signed up for that. Bob King did testify when he was the first witness today and testified in support of that bill. So we'll note that as well. And so then we will move now to Bill 25-176, Edna Brown Coleman Way Designation Act 2023. While I'm at it, I'll note that former Councilmember Harry Thomas did testify in support of that, and that will be noted in the record. We do have a couple of individuals who signed up to testify. Burnett Smith Campbell and Tanya Vidal Kinlow. Ms. Smith Campbell is President Delta Housing Corporation of the District of Columbia, and Ms. Kinlow is listed as Federal City Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Ms. Smith Campbell, are you here? Why don't you proceed and then I'll turn to Ms. Kinlow.
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon. Good.
Great.
Early afternoon.
It is. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. I'm Trinette Smith Campbell, President of the Delta Housing Corporation of the District of Columbia, DHCDC, and I'm pleased to testify on behalf of DHCDC in support of Bill 25-176, which, if approved, would symbolically designate the 1400 block of Morris Street in honor of Edna Brown Coleman. I would first like to provide some background on DHCDC. DHCDC is a nonprofit 501c3 organization incorporated in 1977 by members of the Washington, D.C. alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a national service sorority founded in 1913 at Howard University by Edna Brown Coleman, a lifelong resident of the district, and 21 other young women. DHCDC's mission is to provide affordable housing in the District of Columbia for the elderly and persons with disabilities. While all directors of this nonprofit must be members of the Washington, D.C. alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, DHCDC is a separate independent entity. Since DHCD's inception, the Trinidad neighborhood, particularly the immediate area that surrounds 1400 Morris Street, has been central to its development of affordable housing. In 1981, DHCDC opened Delta Towers Apartments at 1400 Florida Avenue Northeast, just around the corner from Morris Street. This building, which included 150 residential units and 3 ground floor retail spaces, was the first housing development for seniors and persons with disabilities to open in the 8th Street corridor after the devastating 1968 riots. A picture of Mrs. Coleman and the other 21 founders of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated hung in the lobby entrance of that building until 2021, when renovations began. In December 2020, DHCDC's second building, Fortitude at Delta Towers, opened at 808 Bladensburg Road, the former site of one of 2 parking lots co-located with the original Delta Towers. Fortitude was the result of DHCDC's partnership with several other entities, and it includes 179 units of affordable housing and 3 ground floor retail spaces. The 1400 block of Morris Street is on the west side of this building. DHCDC's work stands as a legacy to the trailblazing spirit of Edna Brown Coleman. By their example, Mrs. Coleman and the other 21 founders inspired and encouraged generations of African-American women, including DHCDC's directors, to collaborate with each other, engage in lifelong learning, and use their talents to improve the well-being of individuals, families, and communities in concrete ways. Renaming the 1400 block of Morris Street Northeast in honor of Mrs. Coleman would be a fitting tribute not only to her, but to all women trailblazers, making a difference in the lives of the residents of the District of Columbia. Thank you for your time and this opportunity to share why DHCDC supports Bill 25-176.
Thank you, Ms. Smith Campbell. I don't have a copy of your statement. It'd be great if you could give that to us.
Certainly.
Sure, thank you. And you can submit it via the council's website. Go to council's website, www.dccouncil.gov, and click on hearings.
Sure will. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is Tanya Vidal Kinlow here?
I am on the call, Mr. Chairman.
See you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson and members of the committee. My name is Tanya Vidal Kinlow, and I'm honored to testify before you today on behalf of the Federal City Alumni Chapter and the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated in support of Bill 25176, which seeks to symbolically designate the 1400 block of Moore Street Northeast as Edna Brown Coleman Way. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a national service sorority founded in 1913 at Howard University by 22 young women, including Edna Brown Coleman, a lifelong resident of the District of Columbia. The sorority is committed to providing public service in the areas of education, health, and social welfare. For more than 102 years, DC Deltas have been advocating for change in our city. Combined, FCAC and WDCAC represent over 1,000 district residents living across all 8 wards, and we enthusiastically support the renaming of the 1400 block of Moore Street Northeast as Edna Brown Coleman Way. Soror Edna Brown Coleman was a staunch advocate of civil rights and social justice and spent her life working towards equity and equality for Black women and girls. A true scholar, Soror Coleman served as the class president and graduated valedictorian of Howard University in 1913. Upon graduation, she worked as an educator at Howard Academy, following in the footsteps of her father, who was a Howard University professor. Unfortunately, like too many African-American women in the District of Columbia who are victims of maternal mortality, Soror Coleman died during childbirth at the young age of 24. She and her infant child are buried in the Woodlawn Cemetery in Ward 7. Naming a street in honor of this distinguished leader would not only be fitting, but inspiring to all those who walk down it. Soror Edna Brown Coleman's life, legacy, and vision for the city continues through the work of every member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and can be seen through our public service initiatives and community impact. FCAC and WDCAC implements a range of programs, including scholarship, childhood literacy, voter registration and education, and health awareness campaigns. We also work on programs that end human trafficking, fight police brutality, and protect and promote the health and welfare of women and their families. The proposed street to be renamed the 1400 block of Moore Street Northeast is located just blocks away from the Delta Towers and Fortitude at Delta Towers. These affordable senior housing complexes are owned by the Delta Housing Corporation of the District of Columbia, whose directors are all members of the Washington, D.C. Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. In conclusion, the symbolic naming of the 1400 block of Moore Street Northeast as Edna Brown Coleman Way would be an important milestone in the community. It would be a fitting tribute to an inspiring leader who dedicated her life to fighting for civil rights and social justice. It would also recognize the noble mission of Delta Sigma Theta sorority and the significant impact it has had on the District of Columbia. We urge the council to support this important legislation. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Kinlow, and I do have a copy of your statement, so thank you for that. I don't have questions for either of you, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you both for your moving testimony. Ms. Smith Campbell and Ms. Kinlow, it's great to see you again. It's my understanding that Edna Brown Coleman, the sister of Sterling Brown, leaves a tremendous legacy, and we're honored to recognize her in this way. And I'll just ask you, Ms. Kinlow, can you just describe the excitement that members of Delta Sigma Theta might have for this recognition and what it might mean for future young women to follow in Miss Edna Brown Coleman's legacy?
Councilmember Parker, thank you so much for that question. As you know, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is dedicated to public service and service to our community. One of our most important programs is focused on the leadership development of young women and girls. And we believe that our founders, including Soror Edna Brown Coleman, are the lasting legacies of what we are empowered and encouraged to do on behalf of the women and young girls in our community. And I will tell you that not only are our DC chapters excited about this legislation, but chapters and members of Delta Sigma Theta all across the country believe that this is an important legacy to establish on behalf of Soror Edna Brown Coleman. She really focused her energy and her legacy on improving equity and equality for women. And we believe that this is a way to show our girls that when you are ready to stand in the gap, there is an important opportunity for you to make your mark on society.
Very well said. Thank you both.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you again, each of you. You're excused, and I'm going to move to the next bill.
Thank you so much.
Bill 25-177, Julius Hobson Senior Way Designation Act. I believe Julius Hobson Jr. is here. Mr. Hobson, you need to.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can't see you, but I can hear you.
Oh, well, hold on a second. I'm trying to figure out what's wrong.
Nothing's wrong.
Oh, I see. That's on me.
Oh, my goodness. Beautiful.
Okay,
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. What about yourself?
Okay.
Chairman Mendelson and members of the council, I'm Julius Hobson Jr. I am senior policy advisor at Pulcinelli and adjunct professor at the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University. I'm pleased to represent my family in support of Julius Hobson Senior Way Designation Act of 2023, Bill 25-177. I want to particularly thank Councilmember Zachary Parker for introducing this legislation. For the record, we lived in Ward 5 for a long time, beginning with our first home in the 2900 block of Myrtle Avenue Northeast. My father became active when I attended the segregated Slow Elementary School, which is also in Ward 5. He served as PTA president. Following the 1954 U.S. Supreme Court decision in Bowling versus Sharp, a companion case to Brown versus the Board of Education, I attended Woodridge Elementary, Taft Junior High, and McKinley High School. He was an active parent in all of those schools. Julius Hobson Sr. fought on behalf of DC residents concerning a number of issues, including forcing local department stores to hire Black sales clerks, ending segregation in DC public housing, forcing the Metropolitan Police Department to cease discriminatory housing, serving on the DC Planning Committee for the 1963 March on Washington, and my favorite, threatening to capture rats from Southeast Washington and freeing them in Georgetown. In 1966, he filed a suit against the DC public schools because of a racially discriminatory track system. In Hobson versus Hanson, U.S. District Court Judge J. Skelly Wright ruled in 1966 the track system was discriminatory and the selection of school board members by DC Superior Court judges was unconstitutional. This led Congress to enact the DC Board of Education Election Act of 1968. In 1968, Julius Hobson Sr. was elected to the DC Board of Education, to which I was subsequently elected in 1973, representing Ward 8. Hobson versus Hanson 2 in 1970 resulted in a judicial order requiring public schools to budget expenditures on a per pupil basis. As an elected member of the Board of Education, I found myself in the unique position of both plaintiff and defendant, something I discussed with him more than once. In 1971, he co-founded the DC Statehood Party and ran unsuccessfully for DC non-voting delegate to Congress. He was elected to the first city council in 1974, and he served until his passing in March 1977. Having served as a staffer in both the U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate, as well as teaching legislative writing and research, I'm required to note an error in the drafting of the bill. Going east on Michigan Avenue, Queens Chapel Terrace is the last street prior to Eastern Avenue and the Maryland state line. The street is Queens Chapel Terrace, not Queens Chapel Terrace Road. So line 21, you need to delete the word road. In closing, I want to thank Council Member Parker again for introducing the Julius Hobson Senior Way Designation Act of 2023 and the council for considering it. And while I still have 40 seconds left, Mr. Chairman, I do want to say as an undergraduate student at Howard University and a major in history in the late 1960s, you never got through there without reading anything written by Rayford Logan. So I want to add my name to a list of supporters for Bill 25-174. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Hobson. Thank you for the correction regarding Queens Chapel Terrace. I don't think you said in your statement the connection between your family and Queens Chapel Terrace. Could you say something about that?
Oh, yeah, we live there. Sorry about that. From 1962, beginning in 1962. That's when we moved there from Myrtle Avenue.
Until your father's passing?
No. I was long since gone. I left home in 1969, but my late mother stayed in the house until her passing in January 2016.
Okay. I don't think I have other questions for you, Councilmember Parker.
Mr. Hobson, thank you for your testimony. And I just would note the tremendous legacy that your father leaves. It is one that is inspiring and instructive, the ways in which he disrupted cycles and systems in the district to elevate the plight of particularly Black residents, but residents in Ward 5. It is an honor to recognize him in this way. And thank you for the clarification on Queens Chapel Terrace versus Queens Chapel Terrace Road. We will note that correction. And again, I just want to thank you for coming today to offer this testimony. And I look forward to moving this street designation forward.
Thank you.
Let me just check with staff. I don't have any other questions for you. It's good to see you, and thank you for your patience to be here.
Thank you.
Take care. I'm going to turn to the next bill. Bill 25-178, Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way Designation Act of 2023. I have 5 witnesses listed. Janice, and I believe they're all going to be virtual. Janice Farabee, Scott Roberts, Tiffany Brown, Adrian Moore, and Joseph Levesque. And if I called somebody and they're not here and they get here, we'll let them in. I say let them in. Zoom, you sign up and you're in the attendee, and then you get elevated to a panelist. Ms. Farabee, I think you're first.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Mendelson, Councilmember Parker, and members and staff of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Janice Farabee, and I'm testifying in my capacity humbly as the great niece of Dr. Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee, carrying on her legacy. I'm a proud 45-year member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and a 15-year member of Xi Omega Chapter, the first, oldest, and largest graduate chapter of AKA here in Washington, D.C., celebrating our centennial this year. I'm also an award-winning girls empowerment expert and author, Ward 2 committee woman for the DC Democratic State Committee, and a former Ward 2 ANC for Single Member District 2F08. Please accept my testimony on behalf of the Farabee family and Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated in support of Bill 25-178 to symbolically designate the 1800 block of 2nd Street as Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way. The Farabee family is grateful for this legislation to honor our extraordinary ancestor. Not only was she a trailblazing Black physician and public health pioneer, tirelessly fighting racism and addressing health disparities in the early 1900s, she was an international humanitarian, brilliant club woman, civil rights and social justice activist, the second national president of the National Council of Negro Women, succeeding her mentor and founder of the organization, Mary McLeod Bethune, and fourth national vice president of the Girl Scouts of the USA. She was the first African-American to hold that position. She was a larger-than-life role model and no-nonsense, yet loving family matriarch. Dorothy Farabee's remarkable local, national, and global achievements are deserving of many tributes, but the acknowledgement of her devoted service in Ward 5 as a trusted member of the community, running a successful home-based medical practice, is especially gratifying. Dr. Farabee set up her medical office in the front of the house on 2nd Street, and her husband, Claude Farabee's dental office was in the back of the house. In a 1979 interview with Black Women's Oral History Project, she shares about being quite thrifty. Quote, "I was able to get along with a stethoscope and a blood pressure machine without any fancy medical equipment and material. This was in 1930, and we were able to establish ourselves in this good office." End quote. She served the Bloomingdale community with compassion, as well as the larger community, including the founding of the Southeast Settlement Neighborhood House in 1929, spent over 4 decades at Howard University in numerous leadership positions, including professor at the medical school, clinician in obstetrics, director of Howard University's Health Center, and medical associate to the dean of the College of Medicine. And she was the chairperson of the DC Commission on the Status of Women. Her impressive credentials, which also included being the 9th president of the Xi Omega chapter of AKA, 10th international president of AKA, as well as the sorority's first medical director of the historic Mississippi Health Project, inspired females of color and a few good men to seek leadership roles in their communities and organizations. She is part of the reason I am a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority and pursued a life of service. Without knowing it, she passed the torch to me and countless others. She is part of the historic landscape of Washington, D.C., worthy of recognition. The Farabee family wholeheartedly agrees with Councilmember Parker's statement. As our communities change, it is essential that we remember the many leaders who paved the way for us all. Thank you for remembering Dr. Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee, an exceptional human being whose legacy will be memorialized by this gesture in her old neighborhood and throughout the District of Columbia. Thank you for allowing me to proudly testify today in support of Bill 25-178, the Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way designation of 2023. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farabee. Scott Roberts.
Good morning. Hi, good morning. My name is Scott Roberts. I'm a resident of Bloomingdale, and thank you very much for your very passionate testimony, Ms. Farabee. We need to update the Wikipedia entry for your great aunt with much of the testimony that you just provided. So thank you very much. I happen to run the neighborhood Bloomingdale Neighborhood Listserv, so I'm going to be using your testimony and sharing that with the community. In any event, I am also providing testimony in support of the DC Council Bill 25-178 to symbolically designate the 1800 block of 2nd Street Northwest as Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way. I wish to thank Ward 5 Councilmember Parker for his introducing this legislation. Here are a few key items about her remarkable life, and I'll just read these off. She worked at the Freedmen's Hospital as an obstetrician. She joined the faculty of Howard University Medical School when she was appointed medical physician to women. She married Claude Thurston Farabee, a professor at Howard University of Dentistry in 1930. She and her husband then moved in to the house in Bloomingdale at 1809 2nd Street Northwest. She was named medical director for Howard University's Health Services in 1949, where she remained until 1968 when she retired. Her contributions to the fields of public health and civil rights and a whole lot more warrant this symbolic street designation effort. So this is definitely perfect. I should note that this is the third symbolic street designation in Bloomingdale, the first being the William Jackson Way on the 100 block of Rhode Island Avenue Northwest, and Alpha Phi Alpha Way on the First Street Northwest between Bloomingdale up to Michigan Avenue Northwest. Adding this as the third symbolic street designation in Bloomingdale in the Bloomingdale Historic District is definitely welcome. And I should also add this for Councilmembers Parker. I have no objection to any of the other nomination names being brought forward today for testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Although I didn't hear at the very end, did you say something about other bills or just this one?
No, just this one. Earlier, Councilmember Parker asked others if they had rejected anything, any other people. I just wanted to throw in no, I did not. I have no objection to any other names on today's list.
Okay, well, I'm assuming that unless somebody objects, that they're not objecting. Thank you.
Very good.
I believe Tiffany Brown and Adrian Moore are not here. Joseph Levesque. I'm told he was here and is not here now. I think I have a couple of questions. Janice Farabee. So she was your great niece. You are her great niece. That means she was your great aunt.
Yes,
And that confuses me. That means that she was your grandmother's sister or grandfather's sister?
her husband was a cousin of my grandfather's. So we're still trying to figure out what the exact title is, but my grandfather and her husband were cousins.
So the generational difference is 2 generations, your parents.
Yes,
Yeah. And you talked about all of her accomplishments, but I'm assuming you knew her as you were growing up.
I did not know her as I was growing up. I knew of her. My mother was an Alpha Kappa Alpha woman, and I knew of Dorothy Boulding Farabee. I got to meet and talk with her briefly just a couple years before she passed away. So I did not get to know her growing up. Even, I grew up in New York. She was here in DC. So no, I did not get to know her, but as I said, I just knew a lot about her because my mom was an AKA. So we heard a lot about this fantastic woman.
Thank you. I had one other question. The designation is the 1800 block, but I think the 1800 block runs from, I'm going to say south of Rhode Island Avenue to north of Rhode Island Avenue. She lived on the segment that was north of Rhode Island Avenue or south of? South. You know where, Mr. Roberts?
Yes, it's 1809 2nd Street Northwest is actually south of Rhode Island Avenue.
South of Rhode Island Avenue.
On the east side.
Because we might modify this so that it's just the segment between S Street and Rhode Island Avenue.
Fine with me.
But that means there's signage on Rhode Island Avenue, which is a fairly prominent place. I don't have any other questions. Councilmember Parker, do you have any questions?
It is great to see you, Ms. Farabee and Mr. Roberts. Ms. Farabee, can you just describe the excitement that either AKs here locally may have about the street naming or even those in your family and what it might mean for other young people coming up?
Well, I'll start with family. My cousins, her grandchildren, Buddy, her Todd, her son, her grandson, has already submitted testimony, but the family is just over the moon. She has done so much to empower and uplift people of color here in Washington, D.C. since the beginning, almost of the beginning of the 20th century in the early 1900s. And the family is just in your debt for thinking of her, to have her have a street named after her to memorialize. the sorority, locally, she was the 9th president of Xi Omega. I'm a member of Xi Omega. Again, we're celebrating our centennial this year. So knowing that one of our past presidents is going to have a street named after her is just really, again, we are over the moon and jumping up and down in pink and green. And nationally, she was the 10th international president of Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first medical director for the historic Mississippi Health Project. She was just really involved in early fighting of health disparities, going to Mount Bayou, but even here in Washington, D.C., because she founded, as a result of that in 1929, founded the Southeast Settlement House. And because of the disparities, between Black and white care and healthcare, and as Scott Roberts talked about at Howard University, I mean, she was there for over 4 decades. And so locally, nationally, the sorority Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first African-American sorority here in this country, we are really excited to be able to have one of our dear members have the street named after her. And you asked about just what this will mean. For me, as a global female empowerment expert, she was a role model for me because of, I don't know how she did, Scott was listing all those things. There's more to that list, as he knows. I don't know how she did everything that she did. And she was just such a role model and a person of, if you can see the pictures behind me, the Vogue article and, just being there from children to elders. Black, white, red, yellow, and brown. She did a lot of global work. So she, spoke to people around the world. So she made an impact with a lot of different people. And I think what's so important, I talk about, I'm a former docent at the Museum of African American History and Culture. The need for us to bridge the gap of culture, color, economics, health, so these disparities can be withered away. She did a lot of that way back in the 1920s. And so for her to be memorialized this way, this is only a small piece of the work that she did. So thank you so very much for asking about that. And thank you so much, Councilmember Parker, for introducing this legislation and all of these street names. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fairby. And she does have a tremendous legacy. Mr. Roberts, thank you for always representing Bloomingdale. I really appreciated you referencing highlights from Dr. Celeste Bolding Fairby's life, and also noting that there are no other objections you have to any of the street namings. Can you just briefly speak to the significance of this being the third symbolic street naming in Bloomingdale, one of the district's historic neighborhoods?
Okay, as I mentioned, it's okay. I'll get even later. No, so we have 3. This will be the third historic district designation, or third symbolic street name in Bloomingdale. The first one was William H. Jackson Way, who was a hairdresser who owned a business at First in Rhode Island. That was a couple years ago, and then more recently was the grand street renaming for Alpha Phi Alpha Way next to the Alpha Phi Alpha Mu Lambda House at First and Bryant Street Northwest, which is, as was noted earlier, it's more than one block, and it was done intentionally. So it runs actually a number of blocks up to Michigan Avenue. What else did you want me to add, Councilmember Parker?
No, I wanted you to speak to the significance of this being the third symbolic street naming.
Oh,
but
no.
I think you got the spirit of it.
Okay. Okay.
And it is also worth noting that my team is working with you and Mr. Levesky and others in working on other street namings in Bloomingdale to honor significant community leaders that once resided there. And so I, again, want to thank you all for coming to share your testimony.
More to come, yes.
Yes, more to come.
Thank you. Mr. Levesque or Levesque, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. You've joined us. Do you want to testify?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'll keep this brief. Councilmember Parker, thank you so much for bringing the attention of this woman's incredible life and achievements. And I wholeheartedly support the street naming in honor of Ms. Farabee. As an obstetrician, she devoted her life to the care of children. She founded or organized a welfare campaign in rural Mississippi. She was the person who's devoted her life to improve the lives of others, especially the less fortunate, again, particularly children, at a time when childhood diseases were not easily treated. She advocated for public health, civil rights, and I'm sure all these things were mentioned, but her selfless contributions and courageous achievements were truly felt worldwide, not only here in the United States or in DC, but truly worldwide with UNICEF. And today I hope that the council will honor the work of this very accomplished American citizen. Thank you.
Thank you. And how do you pronounce your last name?
Levesque.
Levesque. Oh, I wasn't even close. Sorry about that.
No.
I do not have questions for you, Councilmember Parker.
No questions, but it's great to see you.
So thank you for your patience, because I think you got on, got dropped off, came back on. So thank you for your perseverance. We've been joined by Councilmember Brianne Nadeau. Did you have anything on this bill?
No, I do not. I have a brief statement on Amigos Park whenever you think it's appropriate.
Well, it'll be about 30 seconds. So I want to thank everybody for their testimony regarding Bill 25-178, Ms. Farabee, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Levesque. The next bill is 25-193, Jeanette A. Michael Way. I don't believe there are any witnesses for that. 25-235 Catlett Alley Designation Act of 2023. I don't believe there are any witnesses for that. That's an official naming. The next bill is Bill 25-246, Amigos Park Designation Act of 2023. Councilmember Nadeau.
Thank you, Chairman, for including Amigos Park Designation Act of 2023 in the hearing today. This bill would officially designate the space at the northwest corner of Mount Pleasant Street Northwest and Kenyon Street Northwest as Amigos Park. As you may know, Chairman, this space and future park has been a long and complicated saga involving overlapping jurisdictions of public and private space and complex agency responsibilities. Part of that complexity is due to the history of this space, a small corner that became a critical nexus of community, not only for the Mount Pleasant neighborhood, but for the immigrant community across the district. It's not a traditional park by any means, but it is part of what makes it special. The reason I filed this legislation when I did is in anticipation of the first phase of construction slated to be completed by the end of this September at the end of this fiscal year. Many community advocates have been waiting a long time for the improvement and formalization of this space, and one step in that process is to make its informal name official. We're also now able to look forward to a second phase of the park that will expand upon it, which funded in the FY24 capital budget, thanks to the investments by Council members Louis George and the chairman. I understand DDOT may have some concerns about the legal specifics of the naming itself, since the project is currently proceeding in public parking space. I'm happy to work with them and with the committee to figure out the best path forward. Frankly, this would be far from the most challenging part of getting this project off the ground. There are no public witnesses on the agenda for this hearing today, but we are reaching out to the ANC and many supporters of this new park space to make sure there is supportive comment on the record for this official naming. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be kind enough to give us a copy of your statement?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Give me just a second. Council member, we are going to work with you on this, but my understanding is that some of the park right now is private property.
There is an aspiration to utilize the private space as well, but that is not currently what we're dealing with.
And I don't ordinarily ask questions of colleagues, but let me ask you this. Well, but with regard to the part that is on private property, do we know how the property owner feels about this?
A great question. So we've been working with the property owner for many years on this, and there had been some discussion about a lease. The property just changed hands, so we are now introducing ourselves to them to see how they want to work together. But the funds that are in the budget and the effort that's underway right now pertains only to the public space.
Okay, then I have this, the portion of this area that is on public property is currently fenced in, is that correct?
That's right. There is a iron fence around it.
Would this be maintained by DDOT or DC Rec, or do we know?
So we have a community group that is interested in helping maintain it. We also have a clean team. And then also we believe that once we get the ball rolling on all of this, similar to what we did over at 19th and Lamont, which is a DDOT owned parcel with similar status, that DPR would be willing to take this on. But that is certainly a point of contention at the moment.
So this is like being present at the creation of a park.
Right, exactly. So it's one of the things that we've really been trying to do is to take the fence down so that people can start utilizing it and adequately cleaning it. The fence has actually been sort of a hindrance to the public enjoyment of the space. And so everything that we've been doing in the lead up to this moment has been to build that momentum to get this park fully established. So the naming is one piece of it. We've spent several years going back and forth with executive branch agencies on the public's desire to utilize this space as a park rather than just have it be fenced off and not available, and worse, not accessible even to keep it clean and tidy and get in and abate rats and things like that. So we're using all the tools that we have at council to realize the community's vision here, despite the fact that we haven't always had a partner in the executive branch. At the moment, the Mayor's Office of Latino Affairs and the Department of General Services are working to implement funds that the mayor asked the council to identify in last year's errata letter. And so there is some indication through that act and this implementation of this phase that the mayor's team does want to work with us. I think final ownership is going to continue to be a question, but naming it is really important because it continues that momentum and it sort of solidifies that community vision and desire.
Thank you. All that's helpful, and we will work with you on this. We have one bill after this, and then we will hear from representative from DDOT. So stick around, please.
Thanks.
There are no witnesses who signed up for this, and the last bill that we have is Bill 25-316, Gordon Way Designation Act, which is a symbolic naming. We have no witnesses for that. So I'm now going to call Brant Miller, who's the Interim Manager, Policy and Legislative Affairs Division at the District Department of Transportation.
Morning, Chairman.
Give me a second before you start. I'm a little too slow here. All right, why don't you begin? Thank you.
Certainly, I have submitted to the committee the long version of the testimony. I have a abbreviated version that maybe doesn't repeat all of the names and purposes of the bills. I'm happy to deliver whichever version you find.
You don't need to repeat the name of every bill.
Great. Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, members of the council, staff, and district residents. My name is Brant Miller, Interim Manager of the Policy and Legislative Affairs Division at the District Department of Transportation, commonly referred to as DDOT. I am here today to present testimony on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser and DDOT Director Everett Lott regarding 10 symbolic street renaming bills, 1 official street naming bill, and a bill officially naming an area of the public right-of-way. For visualization purposes, I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-171, highlighting the 1900 block of Gallaudet Street Northeast. In fiscal terms, the cost of each installed sign for this designation is approximately $190, $65 for sign fabrication, and $125 for sign installation. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs totaling $380. I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-172, highlighting the 1900 through 2200 blocks of Randolph Street Northeast. Sufficient signage requires 7 total signs totaling $1,330. I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-173, highlighting the 1200 block of Kearney Street Northeast. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs totaling $380. I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-174, highlighting the 100 block of N Street Northwest. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs totaling $380. I have attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-175, highlighting the 800 block of 26th Street Northeast, requiring 2 total signs totaling $380. I've attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-176, highlighting the 1400 block of Morse Street Northeast. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs totaling $380. I've attached a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-177, highlighting the 4600 through 4800 blocks of Queens Chapel Terrace Northeast. Sufficient signage requires 6 total signs totaling $1,140. I've attached a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-178, highlighting the 1800 block of 2nd Street Northwest. Sufficient signage requires 2 total signs totaling $380. I've attached a DDOT generated map of Bill 25-193, highlighting the 1900 through 2200 blocks of G Street Northwest, requiring 8 total signs totaling $1,520. The stated purpose of Bill 25-235 is to officially designate the public alley system within Square 3015, bounded by Georgia Avenue Northwest, Crittenden Street Northwest, 9th Street Northwest, and Buchanan Street Northwest in Ward 4 as Catlett Alley Northwest. For visualization purposes, I've attached to this testimony a copy of the plat for the designated alley system. In fiscal terms, the cost of each installed pole is $270. Sufficient signage requires 4 total signs and 4 poles totaling $1,840. The stated purpose of Bill 25-246 is to designate the public right-of-way abutting Square 2596, Lot 1057 at the northwest corner of Mount Pleasant Street Northwest and Kenyon Street Northwest as Amigos Park. I've attached to this testimony a copy of the plat of the designated public right-of-way. I've also attached to this testimony a copy of a DDOT generated map for Bill 25-316, highlighting the alley system within Square 242, bounded by 14th Street Northwest, Rhode Island Avenue Northwest, Logan Circle Northwest, Vermont Avenue Northwest, and N Street Northwest. Sufficient signage requires 3 total signs and 3 poles totaling $1,380. DDOT can absorb the costs of these signs and poles within its current budget and does not foresee any operational impact that these official and symbolic namings would have on the district's transportation network. Therefore, the administration has no objection to these street, alley, and public space namings. DDOT stands ready to assist the council and all other stakeholders with any ceremonial unveiling activities that may materialize as a result of these bills being passed. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Give me just a second here.
Certainly.
So the executive has no objection to any of these bills.
Correct.
I was going to ask you about Bill 25-178, Dorothy Celeste Bolding Farabee Way. As I understand it, that covers both sides of Rhode Island Avenue. But in your statement, you just say 2 signs.
Ooh.
Which is, I think, kind of where we want to go, but.
Right. So it would be 4 signs if it's 2 legs of the street that are bisected by Rhode Island Avenue. I'm not sure why we said 2. I'll have to check, but whatever you end up moving forward with, we can accommodate the 2 signs or the what I imagine is 4 signs if it's the entire,
Okay.
if it's the entire block.
Now, with Amigos Park,
Yes.
you didn't identify any signs or cost.
Correct. So there's a few reasons for that. I think this is naming public right of way. There would be no street signs associated with naming the public right of way. The bill doesn't ask for any signs to be installed. We don't normally install signs in the public space in this way. So I don't think there would be an associated sign for naming the public right of way. So that's why there's no signs or associated cost that's listed in the testimony.
Did DDOT identify any issues with the naming?
I don't believe that there are any issues with naming the public right of way. We can identify the space with the Office of the Surveyor on the plat. Again, it's sort of non-standard for how namings go. We don't normally name, again, the public right of way, but I don't see any issues with it.
I may have more questions on that, but I'm going to defer to Councilmember Nadeau.
Certainly.
Councilmember?
Well, Chairman, usually when the government witness comes and says they have no objection to the legislation, I try not to ask too many questions. But I do have one just to see. Mr. Miller, do you know if there's any plan for a formal agreement with DGS and the Office of Latino Affairs or any other partner agencies for this space?
I'm not aware of any agreement for maintenance of the property, as the public right of way abuts private property. The private property owner is normally responsible for maintenance, similar to tree boxes. So I think we can continue to work with your office. I've worked with your staff on this for a very long time. So I'm happy to maintain that relationship and figure out what we can do to make sure that the appropriate stakeholders are identified for maintenance. I understand there's a Friends of the Park who are interested in making sure that the park stays safe and clean. So I will work with our agency partners in your office to make sure we can figure out a path moving forward.
Awesome. Regarding the signage, is it possible for another agency to fabricate signage for it rather than DDOT?
I would have to get back to you about that. I think if you were to propose any changes to this being public right of way, I think if that's the path you choose to move forward with, the agency responsible could. I don't believe that I can't think of an example of us having done that in the past, but we can, again, work with our agency partners to get you an answer to that question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, because it's non-standard, how we would get some signage. Maybe we could have the Friends of Group apply for a permit to put a sign up or something like that.
I think we've done that in the past for other kinds of signage. That does sound like a reasonable path forward, but I can check with my colleagues to get you a clear answer to that.
Fantastic. Well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Give me just a second. Mr. Miller, I don't think I have any other questions for you. Thank you for the thoroughness of your statement. And I think all of this is helpful. If we have more questions, we'll let you know. We're going to work on these bills over the summer. And so anything additional, reach out to our staff. And thank you again.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Nadeau, you're good for the moment. And there's no one else here. So I will wind this up. This has been a hearing on 12 measures to deal with the naming of streets, alleys, or public space. I'm not going to read all the measures, the titles of all of them. The record in this matter will be open for 2 weeks. It will close at 5 p.m. on Thursday, July 27, 2023. And anyone who wishes to submit comments or a statement should go to the council's website and click hearings, and you'll be able to submit a statement that way. The time is 1:40 in the afternoon, and this hearing is adjourned.